The best Batman stories usually... Oh, forget it. Hot damn, this episode is good. Just from the title card, we can tell that this is going to be a dark, atmospheric episode that puts Batman to the test. Dreams in Darkness begins in a way that immediately catches the audience's attention by showing Batman in a straitjacket, locked in Arkham Asylum. This is the first episode we've looked at that puts Arkham as part of the main focus. As a Scarecrow episode, this story explores Batman's fear, but what makes it even better than the episode Nothing to Fear is that Batman has to live one of his greatest nightmares for real, being locked up in Arkham Asylum because his sanity is in question. Batman is afraid that he belongs in Arkham because he's so similar to his villains, being theatrical and obsessed. Both in the comic and video game Arkham Asylum, Batman is forced to confront the madness in his enemies and inside himself to come out on top and prove to himself more than anyone that he shouldn't be locked up within the asylum. In this very episode, Batman has a wonderfully articulated line, "They put me where they thought I belonged." As a kid, I vividly remember seeing this episode and knowing right at the beginning that this time, Batman was in deep trouble. The opening scene is not only intended to put us on our toes, but also to put into question Batman's sanity. As he talks to Dr. Bartholomew, Batman seems irrationally angry and on edge, which is unusual because in most cases Batman is very composed. After the stage is set, Batman thinks back to the events that led him to that dark cell. We've never before felt as inside Batman's head as in this episode because in another unusual move for him, Batman narrates the events in the past. The reason this is important and why it doesn't need to be in other episodes is because the audience needs to restore their faith in Batman. Hearing his thought processes out loud makes us understand the logic behind Batman's anger and that he's sane enough not to be thrown in the asylum, that the fear toxin is wearing him down. By the way, with how good a narrator Batman is, I'm sure he could make tons of money releasing audiobooks. The flashback begins with an action sequence where Batman fights one of Scarecrow's thugs trying to poison a spa's water supply with the fear toxin. Batman's able to keep the toxin out of the water, but both he and the thug get exposed to it, which starts giving Batman hallucinations. The hallucinations allow us to explore Batman's psychology in a way that's engaging, rather than through dialogue, which would probably be interesting as well, but wouldn't be as exciting in a visual medium. The hallucinations point out many of Batman's obsessions as well as fears, such as the first thing he sees, the Joker, and later on his parents' deaths, which is visually represented in the most dynamic way I've seen yet, where the tunnel Bruce's parents enter turns into a giant gun before shooting Batman himself. Backtracking a bit, Batman does some detective work and goes to Dr. Wu, who examines his blood and offers Batman the antidote. The only problem is that it will put him to sleep for 2 days. Batman makes another move that some would call irrational, deciding not to take it because of how driven he is to protect Gotham, which ultimately was the best choice because of how close Scarecrow is to poisoning the city's water supply. Sorry, I have to make this joke. Somebody's poisoned the water hole! On his way to find Scarecrow, Batman hallucinates that Robin is in the middle of the road and crashes the Batmobile, where doctors from Arkham find him and lock him up because of his ravings due to the toxin. Now we're cut up to speed as Dr. Bartholomew explains that taking off Batman's mask would put him in a catatonic state. Convenient to be sure, but I do like that Bartholomew is so quick to start psychoanalyzing Batman like he's one of the villains that are locked up because of him. At the same time, it's good that Bartholomew's behavior is still within reason, and that a psychiatrist who doesn't know Batman as well as the audience does would find a person dressing up like a bat to be more than a little abnormal. He does know that Batman is obsessed, which leads him to conclude that the Scarecrow's plot is a delusion. The writing is smart by not having Bartholomew dance around the issue, telling Batman straight up that it's highly unlikely that such a giant plot would go unnoticed, which is a good point. This gives the character more dimension than condemning Batman just because he's the stereotypical psychiatrist. Still, the audience knows all the facts, so we're exasperated in a good way, begging to the screen for him to listen to Batman. The story treats the hallucinations as the episode's action sequences, which is good because of how big they are, and uses the segments of Batman talking to Bartholomew as the breathing space between that action. Almost as cool as the gun shooting Batman is the way the hallucination begins, with Batman's cell door creaking open, revealing a bright red light, which is wonderfully atmospheric. With how elaborate these quote-unquote dreams are, it's easy to see why each of them exhausts Batman, especially when he tries to catch up with his parents, but he's moving in slow motion. Along with other segments, it shows the audience that we can identify with Batman because he's afraid of things just like we are, especially feeling helpless, which Batman definitely does when he can't reach his parents and just by being trapped in an Arkham cell. After the scene, Batman has probably my favorite line in the episode, where Batman shows how afraid he is being stuck in Arkham. When Bartholomew enters, he says, "I hope I'm not disturbing you," and Batman's response just wonderfully sums up his inner dilemma. Isn't that why I'm here? Because I'm disturbed? Batman is told that Scarecrow did indeed escape and that he will use Arkham Cavern to poison Gotham. Still, Bartholomew believes Batman is ill, and he tries to inject him with tranquilizers as he tries to escape to stop Scarecrow. Batman's able to escape only to experience his next hallucination, where he sees his greatest foes. The main point of this hallucination seems to be Batman's fear that his mission is hopeless, and that he will give up, succumbing to the madness, which is perfect for being the final one before facing Scarecrow for real. This is especially apparent when Poison Ivy appears, pulling Batman closer to the edge as Alfred and Robin tell him that he's been spending too long in the darkness of his mission, fighting the evil that is always looming over Gotham. As Batman falls deeper into the madness of his delusion, he sees the Scarecrow taunting him that he's losing his mind, which, as said before, is the main fear Batman needs to overcome by the end. What really makes us root for Batman is that even though it's really hard to get over those vivid fears, he continues to press on, which is ultimately Batman's greatest strength, but also why we sometimes have to question him when there seems to be no point in continuing. Of all of Scarecrow's episodes, this one features him the least, but he drives the conflict Batman is facing within himself, and the focus put on Batman more than makes up for the lack of Scarecrow. In this episode, there is yet another ticking time bomb, just like an appointment in Crime Alley, as the timer runs down until the toxin enters the water. Scarecrow even checks his pocket just like Roland Daggett. After taking care of Scarecrow's thugs, Batman has one final test to overcome, where he has to stop the countdown, even as the wire with a shut-off switch looks like a deadly snake. Insert Indiana Jones joke here. This moment would be nowhere near as powerful without that countdown that forces Batman to test his strength of character with so much at stake. You see, this is what Fear of Victory needed. I love how hard this seems for Batman, purely from facial expressions, and it's super triumphant when Batman strangles the quote-unquote snake and rips the wire with only a second to spare. After all the crap Batman's been through in this story, it's satisfying to see the equipment overload and once again expose Scarecrow to his own toxin. It's also awesome to see Batman in a dramatic pose with this really cool red lighting. By the end, Batman proved to more than just himself that he doesn't belong in Arkham Asylum when Dr. Bartholomew says that Batman was right all along. The final image also goes back to the title of the episode, when Alfred injects Bruce with the antidote, leaving him to sleep in the darkness of a bat's shadow. Bruce's final line can be easily glossed over because the episode is ending, but it makes perfect sense after all he's been through. It's good to know I'm safe here. Not only was he trapped in a hostile environment, but his fears almost literally sought him out when he experienced the hallucinations wherever he went. This was probably one of Batman's most difficult tasks in the entire show, so he's earned a good rest by the end. It's even better that he doesn't complain that he's forced to rest like usual, with Gotham being safer now. That being it for the story, let's move on to the animation. My god, this is a gorgeous episode. The drawing on the characters is just top notch. In each and every scene, Batman looks incredible, and these are the type of episodes that make me absolutely giddy when getting the screenshots. I'm always waiting for the next cool Batman pose. The motion is incredibly consistent, with a giant gun being cocked in a realistic manner without having a hand. The hallucinations on the whole display the best animation in the episode, and the best looking one is the one with all the villains. Two-Face literally melts into Poison Ivy, and her arms turn into tentacles that ensnare Batman. The morphing effect on Poison Ivy's arms is probably the most fluid animation in the entire episode. I think the best episode I can use to compare the animation quality is The Underdwellers. I believe it was the same animation studio, and if it was, they truly outdid themselves with the level of quality, and that's still taking into account that I think The Underdwellers looks great. The combo of a great story and great animation is rarer than you might think within the series, but it came together in this episode, which had the effect of amplifying my enjoyment immensely. Moving on to the voice acting, I already said Batman's narration sounded superb, but every single line in the episode Batman has, Kevin Conroy delivers perfectly, and he proved that he can carry an episode through his performance when most of the focus is on Batman. Anything else I'd say would be a repetition of how great everyone, including myself, says Kevin Conroy is, except that Dreams in Darkness was one of his finest performances in the series. Richard Dissart provided the voice for Dr. Bartholomew, and he did a fine job, bringing an air of, I guess, intrusive tranquility. Other than that, I have nothing else to say about him except that he was superb as the voice of Cagliostro in Spawn the Animated Series, and he worked with Diana Mulder, the voice of Leslie Tompkins, on LA Law. I think this was the final time Henry Pollock provided the voice for Scarecrow, and his performance was very much on par with Fear of Victory, though he probably gets the least amount of screen time in this episode. There is a line where Scarecrow sounds particularly unnerving when one of his henchmen asks if Batman is dead. Oh, he's much worse than that. Much, much worse than that. I'll be honest, I was so engaged with the story I didn't really notice the music all that often, but that's probably a good thing. The music fits so well, it blended with the viewing experience. However, I did notice it when Batman is running through the asylum in a straitjacket trying to escape to stop Scarecrow. The music in that section gave off a great sense of intensity and urgency that does a lot to make the audience feel that the stakes are high. I also noticed this when the countdown clock was running low and Batman was trying to overcome the snake hallucination. This review has pretty much been glowing praise, but I can't help it. It's that good. The story and visuals are executed in the best way possible. Maybe my only gripe is that Scarecrow needed to be in it more, but I honestly don't care with how fascinating I find Batman. An absolutely superb way to end the first box set, and would probably be my top 10 favorite episodes of the whole show. I rate Dreams in Darkness a 5 out of 5. Thanks for tuning in again, and now it's time to reveal my surprise. I tried to say almost nothing about it because it would be easy to guess. Next time, I won't be reviewing an episode of Batman the Animated Series. Next time, I'll be tackling something much bigger. The feature-length animated movie, Mask of the Phantasm. By now, we're fully familiar with how Batman the Animated Series works, so it's the perfect time to review this classic. I hope you guys are as excited as I am. Who knows, I might review other features related to Batman the Animated Series. Until next time, take care.